everyone, and welcome to Dr. Judy WTF. And as many of you know, this is a call-in show, and the number to call into is 323-524-2599. I love to engage in conversation, so I'm going to go deep into the topic of reopening childhood wounds through narcissistic injury. And why do people come and see me and the staff at the Psychological Healing Center? Mostly because they've been re-triggered, mostly because their narcissistic injury has been reopened by somebody. And just a little bit about me, I'm a clinical psychologist. I have a healing center called the Psychological Healing Center. You can contact me anytime by going to my website, psychologicalhealingcenter.com, and we do offer 15-minute free consultations. So please take advantage of that. And I also am giving away free PDF copies of my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And you're welcome to download that right onto your cell phone or laptop and read away. So what is a narcissistic wound? A narcissistic wound is a result of a system gone wrong where the parents put their own needs before the child. So this is, again, I'm a systems thinker, so it's a system gone wrong. And in the case of a narcissistic injury, somewhere the parents are making their needs more important than the needs of the child. And this has devastating effects. I have a couple of wonderful articles about the effects on the core belief of these narcissistic injuries. I'm going to get into that. I also want to hear from you. And I'm also going to break down the mind map from a reopening of narcissistic wounds point of view. So if you would be so kind as to, yep, there it is, the mind map, pathway to healing from childhood wounds, and in particular, healing from narcissistic wounds, because narcissistic wounds have a consciousness behind it that I refer to as the consciousness of apathy. And that is specifically the system gone wrong because parents are not tuned in to the feelings of their child. They're not mirroring, they're not attuning. And where does this all begin? It starts with mother, infant, father, infant, family disconnect, and then it reverberates into the culture, it reverberates globally. So you can see that we're having a lot of macro problems as a result of our micro problems. And for those of you who do not know, the mind map was originally a system for healing global disconnect. And we really need that right now. So I'm going to do some more YouTubes on healing global disconnect. And my message is up there on my website, healingglobalDisconnect.com, that I'm going to work a little harder at to bring some more awareness on a global level and how to live the mind map system way. So I want to get into the mind map and narcissistic wounds. And so let's look at panel number 1, which represents the shadows over our psyche. The shadows represent, in essence, the disconnects. And I concentrate on 5 areas. Number 1, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal emotional abuse, neglect, and smothering, controlling, micromanaging the child. And when this occurs, especially early on in childhood, the wounds can last a lifetime. And sometimes people don't even wake up to the fact that they're in horrible relationships, either with another person or even with themselves, that they are closed off to allowing love in, that they destroy potential good bonds, that they defend in ways that don't serve them. And so I'm going to mind map this so that you can kind of trace it with me. So we've got those wounds that I mentioned: physical, sexual, verbal, emotional abuse, neglect, and smothering, controlling. And then we have reactions to those wounds. And those reactions are not very pleasant. And these reactions in panel 2 that I refer to are pre-verbal, because this is a stage in development where the child is not yet able to speak and express him or herself. So these reactions are not in words, they're more somatic, meaning in the body. They are that child that is crying, shutting down at the very tail end of this process when they give up hope. Martin Seligman talks about learned helplessness. So when a child is not picked up and attended to, pretty soon they learn that it is helpless and hopeless, and they give up. And some babies, as we see from studies, particularly Dr. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth did a lot of work around attachment and babies and what happens to babies when they're separated from their primary caregivers. And some of them die because they have a failure to thrive. And yes, we need touch, and yes, we need unconditional love, and yes, we need all of these psychological nutrients, as I like to refer to them, as a way to form a healthy human psyche and a healthy sense of self. So let's go on, and then I'm going to jump into an article, because in panel 3, this is where these negative core beliefs are founded, fundamentally laid down. And you can see the DNA strand, and I'm going to use that DNA right now as a metaphor for encoding. And what gets encoded in there are a lot of very interesting core beliefs. So you can imagine that if the child is disconnected and wounded by mommy, daddy, primary caregiver, then they're going to conclude some things. And I found a really wonderful article called Understanding Your Core Wound and False Self by Shelley Clammer. And she talks about suffering and separating from love, because that's what it is. The first separation is a separation from the unconditional love of your parent. And the further you get from that, the more narcissistically injured you are. And the more of those shadows that cast over your psyche, the more you will retreat into all kinds of very interesting defense mechanisms, which we will talk about, and of course, some really, really destructive beliefs about yourself in the world. So in this article, she talks about this devastation that we cannot bear to acknowledge, that we're moving away from this unconditional love. So what we do is we compensate, and we put on a mask that we show the world. And so to avoid this deepest, deepest fear that we're not lovable, that we're unworthy of love, we start to cognitively conclude some nasty things. And as a result of this separation trauma, and it doesn't even have to be physical separation, it could be an emotional separation, because many of the people who come to the Psychological Healing Center say that their parents were physically there, but then emotionally they were depressed, or emotionally they were unavailable, or they were drinking or using other forms of self-medication. And so, you know, the saying, the lights are on, but nobody's home. And that is a very, very key way to injure your child. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these core beliefs that form. So here's one. Negative core belief: there seems to be something wrong with me. So referring back to Alice Miller and the drama of the gifted child, she talks about how the child will personalize everything, and the child would rather be the bad child in a good world than a good child in a bad world. And I know I say this a lot in my episodes, but it's a really important concept, okay? And the bad child is the child that blames him or herself, and this blaming process leads to internalized feelings, suppressions, repressions that then poison the child and implode instead of express. So here's the something wrong with me. And the compensatory personality is, I must be perfect. I must prove there's something wrong. I must prove the other way. So if I do everything perfectly enough, I will be healed. So the antidote to something's wrong with me is if I do it perfectly enough, I will be healed. So, for the perfectionists out there who have a lot of pressure to perform, uh, for the perfectionists who have parents who value them according to their performance, self worth was according to how high your grade was, or how much money you make, or how well you perform in the soccer match, or in ballet performances, whatever it is. And this is where you adopt adopt the false self to please the parent. And what happens is that your authenticity is pushed aside. And so therefore the true sense of self is not really being fostered. So I think we have a call-in. Is that a call-in?
Yes, it is.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi, thank you for
Hello.
calling again. Yes, what is your name, please?
I'll just use my nickname Min, if that's okay.
Yeah, please do. Okay, so where are you from, Min?
Manitoba.
Oh, thank you so much for calling in. I'm a Canadian as well, from Montreal, Canada, and spent a lot of time in Canada. So, okay, welcome to the show. And tell me how you identify with this particular topic of reopening childhood wounds through narcissistic injury.
Well, I guess sometimes I really almost feel like Humpty Dumpty, is that, something happens and then all of a sudden I'm flooded with all of these kind of core negative feelings about myself,
Yes.
and bad memories, sort of nightmares about things that happened in my childhood so long ago, like what's going on with COVID and just other big losses lately. I'm just shocked how I can feel that kind of core shame, like, well, this is happening because I'm not lovable and I'm a bad person.
Yes. Yes. And that's the little girl in you that personalized everything and made everything to mean that it's all your fault. And I'm going to show you how easy it is for you to recognize the truth value of it. Okay. So I'm going to play a little game with you. Okay. And
Okay.
now you're my therapist, and I'm a little girl, and I come to you and say to you, do you know my mommy ignores me every day, and she never plays with me. She hardly ever makes eye contact with me. And that's because I'm unlovable, right?
No, that's not because you're unlovable. It's because she's having a hard time coping.
No, I must be unlovable, because if I were really, really lovable, my mommy would be playing with me, and she'd be looking at me, and she would be interested in me. No, I'm really not lovable. I'm really not. It's all my fault that my mommy does that.
Honestly, Judy, I can really relate to the little girl that you're playing, because I really have been a placater, and really, really, when people do really bad things to me, or my husband died recently a month ago, I really, I think, I really make it that I'm if I'd only worked harder, if I'd only got him to the hospital earlier, if I'd only done this, I constantly feel like I've lived that way, like very shame based, and I want to do better.
And isn't it interesting that when I reverse the roles here and I played the little girl, wasn't it really easy for you to see that I wasn't thinking straight?
Yeah, it's funny, eh?
Yeah, A. I love the A.
Oh.
It took me years to stop saying A, but I can start again.
Oh, goodness sake. I'm not even aware when I do it. But it is odd. I could hear that the child was not thinking clearly, the role
Yes,
play.
Yes, you can hear that from this conversation because you have an objective observer stance. So here's a concept that I talk a lot about: identifying with it versus identifying it. So in this little role play, I was the child
Ooh.
who was identifying with it, and you were my enlightened witness who was identifying it. See the difference?
Oh, it's fantastic. I know I've never heard that delineation. I love that.
Okay, it's a
I wish
real.
I could do that more often.
Okay, so I want you to practice saying, you split yourself in two and have a dialogue just for fun. You could play that way and say, oh, that man, uh, that man hit me because I'm not worth, I'm not worth it. So that man hit me. Okay, you can make up anything. My daddy is drinking all day because I'm such a bad girl that he needs to drink so that he can get away from me. But you could make a bunch of stuff up, and pretty soon you'll get how obvious it is to identify it versus with it. Okay, and I think that's a really
I'm going to write that out. I'm going to put that like on my mirror. I like that.
Okay, okay. And so with narcissistic injury, because we idealize our parents, because they are our gods, so to speak, we hold them in the highest regard. They are our role models, so we don't understand that whatever they say could be healthy, it could be unhealthy, it could be a result of their particular unhealed injuries. And then what happens is when we grow up, I'll just kind of go on with the mind map and then I'm going to get back to this. What happens is that somebody comes along and reopens your childhood wound. It could be a spouse, it could be a teacher, it could be a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a coworker, a boss, a stranger, and they press that lever of your core belief and bam, 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 what the Freud, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. Okay, reopening childhood wounds through narcissistic injury. So somebody gives you a dirty look and you've been neglected or rejected, then you immediately, the psychological file goes back to that pain point, back to that wound, and it's like a lever's been pressed and then activated chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And that's what I call the Freud, the repetition cycle. And then you go back into it again, and then somebody else activates it. And then you go through the same thing. Pretty soon you find that you're patterning yourself after setting yourself up for these narcissistic injuries. And there's a great video that I want everybody to watch because it's very, very educational on the subject. And it's called The Herder Cannot Be the Healer. Very important topic, because what we tend to do is we want to heal our narcissistic wounds, but what we do is we pick people who reopen the narcissistic wounds in the hope that round two, they will do better. And through conquering this what the Freud game, we will come out victorious and finally be absolved of I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm stupid, and on and on and on. Starting to make sense?
Oh, I so relate to that. I even chose a therapist who actually has a narcissistic personality disorder. I left her like 2 years ago, but I wasted so much time.
I'm sorry, and I have another show called Why People Pick What the Freud Therapists, and this is the same thing. It's just because you're picking a therapist doesn't mean that you're not reopening a wound. And so, unfortunately, some therapists will reopen childhood wounds. In the process of the mind map, we do reopen childhood wounds for the purpose of identifying them and closing the psychological file. That is the purpose, because we've got to go back in there for one more round. Okay, but anybody that is in the therapeutic profession and is opening childhood wounds by demeaning or devaluing or destroying or discarding or something, Sometimes obviously we have to refer a patient out, but it's ethical to give them referrals and to give them closure on it and so on and so forth. But short of that, um, a professional is supposed to be in a position of healing these narcissistic wounds and not reopening them. So if anyone has had that experience, go listen to that video called choose Why People Choose a WTF Therapist. Same thing. So this just goes on and on. You see how pervasive this is?
Yeah, I do, but I am doing way better. I mean, that's how I came to leave her behind, and I do know that she has a full narcissistic personality. But because I was told that by another psychiatrist. But no, I've been doing the mind map, the video series on my own, and when I'm in a better place, I'm going to do the one-on-one. But I'm considering everything I've been through. I'm doing really well because I can basically track it. I miss some pieces here, like identifying with it instead of identifying it. Use that bit of separation. I still didn't have that to be able to track with a bit of.
Yeah, let me elaborate a little bit more about why that happens is because when we're hurt, we regress. And what's happening with you and why you're not able to grab it and identify it is because when somebody hurts you, you regress to that 2-year-old or 3-year-old. You understand?
Ooh, that really makes sense. Because, it's when I'm bullied, too, and there's a lot of bullying going on, obviously, with my husband's recent death. There's a lot of chaos in his family system. We both came from very, very, very problematic family systems, like a lot of addiction in both of our family systems,
Yeah.
But we're not. I mean, he wasn't, and I'm not. But that's what I had to go back into. And when they start bullying me in that very kind of alcoholic manner, I really freeze, and I think, where did I go just now?
Of course, where you went was you went into complex PTSD. Complex PTSD, from the way I see it, is unhealed childhood wounds. PTSD is straight up somebody puts a gun to your head, or you have a car accident, or you survive a major life trauma. PTSD. The complex PTSD is you can't even identify what happened because it was pre-verbal, but you can if you do your detective work. Okay, see? So
I will do it.
And by the way, I also want to let people know that we have people on staff who work also on a more sliding scale basis. Just ask for it. We have all levels of therapists at the Psychological Healing Center, PhDs, life coaches. We just released an excellent video hosted by Yitz Epstein titled The Mind Map Journey to Recovering from Narcissistic Abuse. We really, really hit the nail on the head. And that's available. People could work with Yitz and they can work with me if they like. You've got a lot of choices. And the main thing is that we want you to learn the system. We don't want you to be stuck in what the Freud of keeping reopening childhood wounds through injuries. And anything can be injurious. A song can trigger a person with loss. Smell can trigger a trauma. Anything, a place can trigger someone. So the more we're able to break it down and shine the truth light on what happened, who done it, how we recorded it and encoded it into our psyche, the better off we are. And once you start reprocessing those emotions, and I like to call it kind of like letting the poison out, the psychological poison out, and having the therapist be an enlightened witness for you, that's where you start healing. So I want to go on a little bit more about some of these negative core beliefs that implant into the psyche as a result of these narcissistic injuries. Did you have another thought or another question?
No, but thank you so much. I got so much out of this.
You're very welcome. I really appreciate you calling in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so moving deeper into this article by Shelley Clammer. Thanks, Shelley. You did a great job of breaking down these negative core beliefs. Here's another one. I cannot do or I cannot do enough. Negative core beliefs. I cannot do enough. I must have done something bad. So the compensatory personality for this particular core belief is I must prove that I can do and decide and act by becoming an overdoer or overachiever. Anybody relate to that? You can call in on that one. I'm sure there are a lot of people who think that they cannot do enough. Where does this come from? Again, a narcissistic injury of a parent who rewards the child for doing. Uh, there's no being here. If you're just sitting around and laughing or playing a game or tickling each other, that doesn't count because you're not getting that A plus or you're not getting the trophy at the baseball game or something like that. So what happens here is the personality becomes grandiose, what it can do. So that becomes important. I will be a human doer, not a human being. This personality just struggles with over efficiency and vanity. And the compensatory behavior here is if I accomplish enough, I will be healed. So there's a belief that this is a race. The more I do, the more A pluses I rack up, the more degrees I rack up, the more trophies I rack up, the bigger my car, the nicer my house. I'm winning the game and I will be healed. You see what an endless sick cycle this is? Because there's no end to it. Where do you draw the line? Two A pluses, 10 A pluses, two cars, 10 cars. And see, what happens is that because the connection's been cut, the narcissistic injury between the mother child, the connection's been cut. So now there's nothing left to connect with because that is non-existent there. So now plan B, let's just get more things. Let's just do more and therefore I will be healed. Okay, so here's another one. Negative core belief. I am inadequate. I'm stupid. I don't know enough. I hear this a lot. By the way, all of these I hear a lot. And so that's why I'm very thankful for this article because she kind of organized it really well. And thank you very much for writing this, Shelley, if you're listening. I am inadequate, stupid. I must prove that I'm adequate and smart. Struggling between feeling stupid and trying to be overly adequate by being overly analytic and overly reasonable. And so for this person, the path to healing is if I'm smart, I will be healed. If I'm smart, I will be healed. So on the surface of it, it sounds good. If I'm smart, I'll be healed. It's just that it doesn't work out that way. And I think we have another call in. So hi, you are on the couch. And who am I speaking to, please?
Hi, Dr. Judy. It's the loser.
Hey, we have a long history of this. And how you doing?
Fantastic. What a great topic.
Thank you.
I was kind of all over the mind map listening to this. I think back being a product of a narcissistic and borderline parental pairing.
Yes.
I through my journey to where I am today, I remember listening to the last caller. I remember going through a therapy session, and it's funny because it was overlapped and juxtaposition over the same time I was discovering the mind map. We were having a discussion, and we were talking about an incident where I was being physically abused, and I was explaining the story to her, and remember rationalizing it and saying, you know, and the more I look at it and try to analyze it looking back, I says, you know, maybe I wasn't the, you know, best kid, maybe I did deserve that. And I remember looking across at her and the look on her face, and she just looked straight at me. She goes, "You were 4 years old."
So she was your enlightened witness.
And when she said that, it was like I fast forwarded to where I am now, looked down and saw a 4-year-old in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, how dare him?
Great. Because most children don't think that way. Most children are stuck in the blame. And can you please catch the audience up with the loser, because we have a long history. It's our little inside joke. And so just Cliff Notes version of where you were when we spoke years ago, and where you're at today, and that beautiful picture you sent me, by the way. The loser has now lost how many pounds?
I've been hovering right around 220 for 3 years, and I was that caught me off guard on that one. I was 565 at one point.
How much?
565.
565 pounds?
Yep.
Okay. I mean,
I was bedridden for 3.5. Well, on crutches for 3.5 years, pretty much in bed. I was circling the ball.
Yeah. And today you just sent me. I don't remember the certificate, but it was something, a very, very high achievement. You've been researching. You now have your PhD. Is that correct?
I'm actually writing my final chapter of dissertation.
Okay.
And I was recently inducted into Psychi, which is the International Psychological Honor Society.
Unbelievable. This loser only lost about 400 whatever pounds, 300 whatever pounds, and is now working on dissertation. And so you could see clearly. So if I ask you, how did you defend, what were your childhood injuries? So what was your panel one?
Oh gosh. My panel one was it was dark.
It was dark. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I mean, it was somewhere in there, some sort of abuse or neglect, correct?
Yeah, I was physically abused. I think it. I think back and I tried to do it. I was a middle child. I was the third boy, followed by two daughters. I mean, I remember trying to do the math and trying to figure out why, and I ended up with the target on my back. But I've had it told to me time and time again, people that I meet now today and I talk to, and they tell me all the time, I just never agreed to how you were treated when you were younger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They saw it. And what did you conclude?
What's that?
They saw it. What did you conclude? What was your negative core belief?
I was worthless. I mean, I was a loser. I deserved everything.
Yeah, you said it. Yeah.
Talking about I would set high goals for myself, and in retrospect, looking back now, I could have easily achieved if I really just applied myself. But I said, because I know, because I've attained high goals now. I know what it feels like. I know what I'm capable of.
Yes.
But I sold myself short, and I always sabotaged myself before I got to the goal, and wrote it off, as an external locus control thing. It's not in my control. And that's the one thing that and I profess to the people that I talk to and I coach. We make that decision, and we have to make that decision. We have to be aware of what's going on. We make that decision to move forward, and you have to be cognizant of that all the time, because were able to achieve great things. And it's funny, I've had through the doctoral process, I told my wife that I've had three huge challenges that I can think back of, and I just had the third one, and that was part of my program, comprehensive exams. And it almost beat me. It almost beat me. And I remember just finding that extra gear, and nailed it.
You nailed it.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say what's possible once you come out of the shadows of these injuries, these the wounds of the past, the narcissistic injuries. All of a sudden you are able to flow, and not only did you think that you were worthless, but you also, I'm sure, felt very powerless in all of this. And so now that you're accomplishing and you're not under the bus, so to speak, of these core beliefs, you're
right.
identifying them and not with them. Look what's possible. And that's the purpose of this journey, is to clear away the past, decode the past, and then reboot the system. And you're such a wonderful example of rebooting the system into health. I just saw a picture. That was such a wonderful picture. You look so healthy and in shape, and then your accomplishments and the wonderful relationship you have with your wife, and the appreciation that you have for the challenges that you faced and overcame. And this is such a success story that, we still enjoy referring to you as the loser. And so, yeah.
And expanding on the clearing the path, one of the thoughts I was having even as I was telling my story is, I have a conviction, and I believe this to my core, that the only obstacles in my path are the ones that I create. So there is nothing that can stop me.
Well, this is what happens when we understand that we're not the cause of part one of our lives. And what I mean by that is that childhood is a hostage situation. So it's not your fault that you ended up believing that you're stupid and worthless and so on. And we're at the effect of that. It's just that once you go through this tunnel of darkness to the light and you're on the other side, then you can truly say, however, now I am the cause of part two of my life, and nothing can stop me. It may be a hurdle that you feel will bring you down, but then you can dig into your resources and say, no, I don't want this to be a hurdle. I'll just fight harder. I'll study more. I'll do more. Okay. And this is different than I will be healed if I am, if I'm accomplished. Okay. I think in your case, it's different than that. It's different than if I get A pluses and degrees, I'm going to be healed. You got healed first. And then you were able to release all of this flow, intellectual flow, creative flow, physical flow. So I don't want people to confuse the two. Okay. So once you're healed, you can release and start to grow again, because that's what happens when the shadows are pushed aside and worked through.
It's like when I achieve, it's not ends, it's a means, and then when I achieve it, it's like I have this, and I can't explain it. And I think it ties in the whole self-actualization and all of that, but I have a deep desire to raise all boats around me.
Beautiful. And that, because now you have capacity, you're not literally all bogged down. And look at the defense mechanism that you used before. The food was your number one defense mechanism, and it incapacitated you, and you took that on and you released that one, and then all kinds of other things flowed out of it. So I know that I'll just continue to hear from you and your wonderful accomplishments and sharing your journey. And sometimes people need to hear from people who've been through the mind map journey, because there's just so much therapy out there that's endless and doesn't have a system behind it. And that's the number one complaint I get, by the way, from people. Oh, I've been through therapy. Okay, how long? Oh, 2, 3 years or more. Really? What did you learn? And they get a blank look on their face. And this system will not leave you with a blank look on your face, because you're going to learn
No,
what
it
God
will.
encoded, and then your whole process of decoding all of that. And you know, as corny as it might sound, you'll learn how to think like a shrink, so you can keep exposing the lies and misconceptions and keep moving through them and processing your emotions. So, you know, I can't tell you how impressed, proud, I don't even know the right words I am, uh, uh, I am of you and your accomplishments. And think about how hard you work to go from a person encumbered, completely encumbered by your weight, and then freeing yourself and educating yourself. So much has gone on. So,
Well, and you know, it's really a powerful thing to comprehend, and it kind of ties back in, and I'll wrap it up with this. You know, I talked about how the obstacles that are in my way are, I can only create them, so they're non-existent. So if I choose not to create them, they will not be there. They will not stop me.
that's right. And
But
that's
in retrospect, looking back at the hurdles, like you talked about, like the eating, you know, the mechanisms, I put those there too. But I was also smart enough and had the wherewithal inside me to break them back down and put them away.
sure.
And there's power there.
Okay, and just like your therapist said to the 4-year-old, I'm also saying to you, reminding you that the defense mechanisms are an outgrowth of defending the narcissistic wounds that are constantly being triggered. But now that you're aware, you can truly say, I am the cause of part 2 of my life. And if I have hurdles, there's nothing stopping me. It's not mom or dad or my multi-generational dis-ease. It's back in my hands now. And that's the point. Power back in your hands, control back in your hands, responsibility back in your hands.
Yep. My favorite saying, and I say it to myself all the time when I doubt myself, I am the storm.
You are. Oh, love it. Okay. Well, you've certainly been a very
well. Thanks again.
Storm in a good way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, because I'll tell you what, the juxtaposition of mind map and the therapy I was going through and my own exploration opened it all up, and I can't thank you enough. So thank you, and
you're welcome.
I'll be listening.
Okay, all right. Appreciate you calling in and your wonderful picture and degrees and accomplishments. Thanks for sharing all that.
We'll stay in touch.
We will.
We'll stay in touch.
Okay, all right. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Okay, so nice to hear from him. All long history here. Okay, so going back into these negative core beliefs that are the result of childhood wounds through narcissistic injury. I am inadequate. So a narcissistic injury of a parent to a child, leaving them feeling inadequate, is registering, encoding, I'm inadequate, I'm stupid, I don't know enough. Okay, so if I'm smart, I'm going to be healed. Here's another one. I don't exist. This is pretty to the core. People who have been neglected, emotionally neglected, oftentimes we discover that their negative core belief is they feel that they don't even exist. I'm nothing. I have nothing. The false core develops earlier than others, maybe even in utero, We have not enough research to know what the child is feeling. Again, pre-verbal, but somewhere in there we are very intelligent, sensitive beings, and we can sense when we are wanted. Um, so here is this: I am empty, I don't know. This type of person is unsuitable, but she makes a note of this, for Buddhist and non-dual spiritual practices um, because they reinforce that I am no thing. But I don't know. That's her opinion. I guess there's another way to be in that and still have um, a realization that you might also have a negative core belief. Um, so here's the compensatory personality. I must prove that I'm something. This personality thinks feelings and does not feel them. So it's a thinking thing, not a feeling thing. A person may even dissociate. This is the spectrum of dissociative disorders. I'm nothing. And here is the conclusion of if I disappear enough, I will be healed. I'm remembering a case of a woman that I worked with many years ago who felt that she had to really dumb everything down and she had to become more and more voiceless, and she started imploding into depression and all kinds of nasty defense mechanisms because she figured out that she needed to be non-existent in order to please her mother, who didn't have enough emotional bandwidth to be a mother. Okay, so here's another one. I am alone. I fear being shunned. So here's the antidote. I must connect with people. And this will give me a little buzz if I'm not alone. So it's sort of like people become your addiction. And so connecting with people is the drug. If I connect to others enough, I will be healed. So that's the antidote. And so can you see that all the time the antidote is something somewhere, some kind of an interesting solution that they've come up with in 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 um, in contradiction to the negative core belief. Here's another one. I'm incomplete. I'm not enough. If I have enough extraordinary experiences, I will be healed. And the last one, I am powerless. I have no force, no influence, no agency in the world. And that is because I'm imagining the blueprint is controlling parents. They didn't give the child, a chance to realize their own power. They were in control. And so here's the antidote. If I'm powerful enough, I will be healed. And then one more, and then I know we're kind of running out of time. I want to discuss a little more. Here's one. I am loveless. There is no love. So what happens in a narcissistic family environment? There's no love because there's no connection, because everything is dependent and conditional on achievement and obedience and so on and so forth. So the child concludes that there is no love. And so when that adult child gets in a relationship, then it's not about love, it's about power and control and achievements and so on. It's just that the capacity for love has never really been developed. And so therefore, plan B, let's just have more sex or have a bigger house or do more things or watch more TV or drink more alcohol or something. And so it's never really about a connection. Why? Because it's the parent's responsibility to form the connection with the child. That's how healthy attachment occurs. Dr. John Bowlby, healthy attachment, and then there's avoidant attachment, and then there's it's kind of like a dysregulated kind of attachment, and all kinds of attachment styles. And our blueprint determines in large part how we're going to attach when we become adults. So here is the antidote to this. This type seeks to act loving, but as with roles played, it cannot receive the love that it wants. Why? Because it never experienced genuine, authentic, connected love, unconditional love. So the loveless struggle with repressed anger, and the antidote, if they say, the antidote here is, if I am loving enough, I will be healed. So they're loving, but they don't really feel it from the core, and they don't really receive it. Just a couple of other things about this article, reminding you that this injury occurs way early in life, the first few months and years of life. Our separation away from love is a traumatic shock to the nervous system. Okay, the inevitable failure of the false self. This is when the mask starts to fail us. And so she goes through some steps on how to heal from this. Very powerful and similar to some of the work that we do at the Psychological Healing Center, which is tracing the core belief, which obviously we do, identify the negative core belief and look at it in terms of the whole. I talk a lot about the whole in the soul. So really feeling the hole in the soul, and ultimately understanding that it was not your fault, that it was put there, and having the courage to experience it and stay in it, and then have the courage to tap into, according to her, this kind of a soul unconditional love of self, which first we have to build a self. So a lot of people that come to see me feel this emptiness, and again, the self has to be built, slowly built up, before there's a sense of unconditional love for self. I do agree here that self empathy is really, really key to healing. And I have seen people really turn inward to themselves and support themselves and start feeling for themselves the pain that was inflicted on them. And I think that's a really, really important part of the healing. And I think we're almost done here. I wanted to go to, if there's anybody else that has a question, I think I have time for that. Anybody wants to call in, please do. And if not, I'm going to go to Shrink That Tune. And this is by request. One of my patients requested this song, and I think this is a trigger song, reopening a childhood wound kind of song. And remember, I talk about anything can reopen that wound. A bad look, a rejection, a bad grade, a song, a sight, a smell, anything can be reopening the wound, because ultimately these unhealed wounds are easy trigger points. Okay, so here is the song. Hearts that are broken and love that's untrue. These go with learning the game when you love her, but she doesn't love you. So I'm going to relate that to primary caregiver. So mom, let's say, is incapable of love. She doesn't love you, but the baby obviously is attaching and needs this bond. When she says that you're the only one she'll ever love, then you find that you are not the one she's thinking of. So here's this person recreating the wound by attaching to somebody that they love but doesn't love them back. One of the most painful dynamics in the world. Feeling so sad because you're always alone, that's when you're learning the game. Feeling so sad because you're all alone and blue, you're only learning the game. So this person is figuring it out and figuring that this is the game of life. I love, but I'm not loved back. Very, very painful. And the reverse of it is when somebody loves you, but you don't love them back. So that's kind of like the reverse way of controlling the feeling of not being loved. Okay, I want to say that again, so that when we're not feeling love, we identify with the rejector and play that side of the coin so that we can feel in control of the primary narcissistic injury of not feeling loved. In other words, if you can't beat them, join them. And isn't it better to reject than to be rejected? When she says that you're the only one she'll ever love, then you find that you are not the one she's dreaming of. So this disappointment, this feeling of worthlessness, this feeling of not being lovable, not mattering, hearts that are broken and love that's untrue. You're only learning the game when you love her, but she doesn't love you. When you're learning, that's when you're learning the game. When she says that you're the only one she'll ever love, then you find that you are not the one she's dreaming of. So the ideal is that originally you bond to your mother, your primary caregiver, and you love her unconditionally, and she loves you unconditionally, and this bond is authentic and strong. It's just that when this doesn't get laid down early in life, then we start chasing the people that don't love us. We form toxic bonds, feeling so sad because you're all alone and blue. You're only learning the game when you love her, but she doesn't love you. That's when you're learning the game. And what a sad game to learn. And once we've learned that game, we don't really think that love exists. So this is when we start playing a different game of power and using people and so on and so forth. And it's an ugly game to play, and it's an ugly game to have been played upon the person from their own family of origin, their mother, father. Okay, so I hope that everybody is starting to connect the dots and learn, and please know that we are very, very accessible and available for free consultation if you're listening from another country. We do a lot of Skype work, and because of COVID, we're doing Skype, and love to talk to you from wherever you are. And thank you so much for tuning in. Good night, everyone.